But then I started working on Django. Then I worked on building a complete Django project and several other projects after that. And since then, I've been working mainly in Django. And I think it was a great journey for me to, learn and exploring as well. And meanwhile, I figured out that, this kind of really excites me. So um, yeah, and apart from that, apart from being a software engineer full time, I also impart my time to contributing for community initiatives, wherein I've been a director for Women Who Code Delhi for 7 years, and also I've been like a jury member for GHCI, and also like a core team member for other communities as well. So I love to contribute to communities, and it's great, how what kind of people you meet and how much things there to learn. So I guess we are here at one such event. So I can start with the Python because uh, okay, that was an empty slide. That's fine. We are going to start here today with Python and Flask API development. Um, and I guess the first slide is about what is an API. Okay. And before we understand what is an API, I want to understand, how many people here have worked actually with Python. So, like, if you have worked, you can just mention yes in the chat. And if you have worked on any other language, you can mention any other language that you have mentioned, let's say Java or any other thing. Cool, that's nice. That's so great. There's so many people who have worked on Python. That's great. Uh, so I guess you would have a lot of questions on that. So maybe we can take that up at the like end part of the session. Let's start with the. So why do we use Python? First of all, it's a beginner-friendly language. It's very easy to pick up. We do not have a lot of, I would say, complications to start with. It's very easy. We do not have to declare a variable. We just go ahead, assign a value to it, and print it, and it will just give us that value, right? So it has ease of use and readability, which means you can modify it, as you go on writing more and more code. Okay, you do not move according to the language, but the language kind of moves according to you. So it's flexible in that way. The second reason is it has extensive libraries and frameworks. Surely we have seen that there are so many AI ML libraries and frameworks. So, like for example, we have NLTK, we have Pandas, NumPy. So these are all based on Python itself. Matplotlib, right? Scikit-learn. So these are all libraries that helps us, also promote the language as Python. Then it has strong community support. Python, Python is maintained through a stronger community wherein, like there are different other groups and they have conferences happening like PyCon. So it kind of shows that, people kind of come up together to solve an issue and a problem. And they kind of, it kinds of very developer friendly, and people come to support the language together and solve problems. How is it versatile? So it is suitable for web development. So under web development, there are two frameworks that are being used mainly, majorly. One is Flask, one is Django. One Django is kind of similar to, like, Django is basically used for larger projects wherein we need more stability, we need more security, reliability in terms of a heavy backend work. Whereas Flask is worked on where we want quick and easy solution, where we do not focus more on reliability and security, where we just want our data to go through from one place to another. So we use Flask. Then there are other libraries as well for web development. If you want to explore it, they are there. And then data science, we know that data science, matplotlib, to basically plot all those graphs. And then we have panda numpys. Like panda is the basis of data science, right? For automation, Python is used for basically when we try. What do you mean by automation here currently is that when we try to do some task, uh, you know that wherein which is a manual task, highly manual in process, which requires a lot of people's intervention, but we want to automate that task. So in that, Python scripting works. Like Python web scripting is a solution to that. Okay, let's quickly jump on to Python basics recap. We will be dealing with Python medium. I guess a lot of people here know Python basics, so we can just quickly overview that. We have kind of data types, which is int, float, string, list. Int means integer, float means decimal value. String, we all know, like textual format, textual type of value. List is a type of a data structure. We will be talking about it later as well. Then for example, we can do simple variable assignments. So let's say, um, in case of let's say we can do when we add some value to int, we can do it using very simple variable assignments. And then we have for loops, looping through a list. I guess this is something you'll be aware of. We can move to functions now. So under functions, so functions are kind of an important part for oops like object oriented programming. What we do in there, let's say we want to structure a web app. In that case, we will be writing lots of functions. There's a difference between functions and methods. So functions are something that kind of do a task, but whereas in method, it belongs to a class mainly. So what we do is, let's say if we define a class and then we add a method to it, so it does that work of that class, so we kind of call it a method. Okay, so I think that's the difference between function and a method. um, so data structures, in terms of data structures, we have lists, tuples, dictionaries, and sets. List, in case of it can be used to create and edit list. Tuples are basically immutable sequences. So tuples are very unique to Python. In other languages, we do not see generally tuples. Uh, so tuples are basically somewhat that once you have added a data structure to a tuple, it cannot be edited. But again, like Python is such a friendly language, you will be able to work around with that as well, right? Then we have dictionaries. Dictionaries are kind of like the JSON value. We have a key, we have a value. So we can that is, dictionaries are generally used for parsing objects or maybe sending objects to API. So that is used for communication between within an API development when we work with Python. So when we see JSON, right, JSON has multiple objects, then a key value and the key and value. And then we can, against a key, we can have list. Against a key, we can have another dictionary. So all that is possible when we add dictionary as an object or when we return it. So that's where dictionaries are highly used in API development. Secondly, we have sets. So sets, I would say, there's a very unique quality about sets, and that is they are unique. Okay, how they are unique? So let's say if we have a list, okay, and we add all of that data in a set. All right. So what it will do, let's say if our list has 1 1 and 2 2, which means 4 values. So what set will do, it will basically convert it to 1 comma 2, and it will remove all of the duplicate pairs. So that's what set is unique at doing. And while we practice in lead code or in hacker rank, when we practice code, There are certain needs, where we want to remove the duplicates, whereas in Python we have a data structure that does that, so we can simply use that there. And then sets also provide functions like intersection, wherein it can find the commonalities between two lists and then can give you as a result, right? So it does that through just one function dot intersection, whereas in lead code, we would have to write like lines of code for it. So yes, that's why Python is preferred. Second, next, we'll talk about error handling. So under error handling, I guess it's a very typical structure across languages, wherein we have a try except clause. Under try, we write the statement. This could be any statement. Do not go by that, we are assigning a variable, and it could be any statement. Under try, we just write one statement. If that statement works, okay, then the except block will not be executed. Okay, let's say if the try, this statement does not work, it results into any error. Okay, so then it will go to except block, wherein it will check that, okay, what is the type of the error that has occurred. In this case, it checks for except value error. Okay, if it is a value error, then it will print that statement, otherwise it will not do anything. Okay, what could other thing be done is that try except, where if we remove this value error from here, what it will do, it will just execute this print statement, whatever the error be. It will not check the particular type of it. So we are kind of here bounding the except to a particular type of error that we want to deal with. Okay. In case if you have any questions, so you can put that up in chat, and I can take them out later in Q&A, or maybe you can note them down, among yourself, and can ask at the end. So next is object-oriented programming. Oops. This is very like a typical example wherein we want to have a class and we assign a particular function to it. So I guess if you understand with oops, so like what do you understand with it? Like, could you give like one liner in it? Or if you have used it anywhere, maybe you can tell that where have you used it? Something like that. Okay, so I guess I do not see any replies. So can I assume that people have not used oops as of yet in Python? Like you can, even if you have not used it, the concepts, even then, I mean, you can state one of the usability of the concept that it has, right? Yeah. So like, what is the usability of this concept? Let's say we have inheritance, we have encapsulation, we have, other various different examples, abstraction, polymorphism. Yes, to collect similar traits of something. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, I guess that was good. I think a lot of people have worked, so you must have an idea about it. Uh, Basically, what we do in oops is kind of structured programming, wherein uh, we want to avoid doing the same thing again. Okay, there's a principle: do not repeat yourself. So in order to do that and implement that, we put us ourselves through a structure, and one of them is oops. uh, what what is this example doing here is that we have a class called as dog. It could be any other class. We have an init function. If you have worked in Python, it's fine. If not, then init function is kind of our constructor function in like in Java. In init, basically this function gets executed the first time the class is instantiated. So the first time the object of this class gets created, the init function will get called, and at that time self dot name will assume its value, which is name. Okay, And then we have this function bar self. So like init function gets executed every time this object is instantiated, but the function bar, this does not gets executed like that. Okay. um, it will be only executed when we call this function. Okay. So yeah, and when we call this function, this will be basically unique to this particular object being called on it. Now in here we have kind of one principle is encapsulation, wherein we have encapsulated the task of barking to a class which is dog. Okay, so like someone mentioned, collect similar traits of something. So in case, let's say it's an animal class, and let's say an animal does is walk, bark, talk, right? So we put all of those functions together under one class and we put it there. For example, like a human being, we have certain set of functions like we talk, we walk, we eat food, we see, we go there and give talk, or we whatever do. So all of those functions are associated to one entity, that is one human being, right? So that's what we do. So class is an entity, and all the functions that it does, it is assigned to that one entity. And that entity gets instantiated, or gets replicated. Let's say if you want to create another human being, we will put up all of those features of a human being that that a human being has, and we'll create another object of it, like a replication of a human being, right? And then when we replicate a human being, what do we expect? It will be able to have all the functions: eat, talk, sleep, walk, whatever we have, right? So that's the same basis how the classes in Python work, generally in OOPS. Okay. Then we can move to Flask. But I guess, okay, I think I'll take questions at the end. So what's next is we can move to Flask. We have seen basically under OOPS function, we see that we can write classes, we can add properties to it, and we can extend that functionality and then can add more features to it, right? We can replicate that one object into creating multiple objects of it, and then we can basically use that to store that data that we want. Okay. We'll talk about database at the end of Flask, because Flask kind of has API development. So first is setting up Flask, pip install Flask. So what happens that I think if you have used terminal, so what we do is that pip is kind of a package that gives you a set of packages that are there in Python. Okay, so those Python packages then you can install in your system, and those can be used through imports. Okay, so the first step is to install those packages, and even prior to that we need to install pip. I guess if you're using Python, so you would know how to. I can assume that. But yes, cool, great. So you guys know. So Flask, if you see that here, pip, that this is the command basically that is being used. Install is the command, pip is the package name, and Flask is basically the name of the module that we are going to download. And this pip has kind of a website wherein you can go and find out what is the exact name of the module that we need to download for a particular functionality. Okay, so let's say in here F is capital, right? So because the pip package, the pip module that was uploaded on pip, it had F at capital, and if you move it to small f, or if you change any of the naming convention, then it might lead into an error. So once we have installed Flask, we can go into creating a basic Flask app. So I can tell you a couple of things regarding Flask before we move on to that. So Flask is very easy to start with. API development structure, wherein we can be done in just one or two files with the whole API. We do not need to write one whole folder and modules and hundreds and 200 lines of code, or we do not need extra settings. extra database integration. We do not need all of that. Flask is very quick. If you do a quick tutorial on Flask, you can easily get started with an API in place. So first thing is that we do from Flask, import Flask, app is equals to Flask underscore name. Okay. So you can question that, that in here we installed, Flask with capital F, but in here we are doing from, small f. Why we are doing that? Because the folder structure and the file name that, that is there, so it has small f, whereas that was the name of the module, and this we are referring here to the file structure. Okay. So yeah. Now, next we do app is equals to Flask name. So we are kind of importing app from the Flask. What we're doing with app, when we write app like this, we are trying to instantiate an object of the app, which is application. So what Flask will do, it will quickly create an application for us, like a small, server for us running. And then we do a function def home. Def is used to define a function in Python. Home is the name of the function. Return hello Flask. Return is we are returning something at the call of this function. So we have added a slash. Now this is @app.route slash. Okay. So @ means it is a decorator. Okay. And what a decorator does is decorator adds some functionality at the top of a function. Uh, Decorators are a part of Python functionality, and in here app.route is a decorator. Okay. We have added a decorator. Route means basically a way wherein we can, let's say we have a website. Okay, we type in our URL. Okay, and we can hit that URL and go to a particular web page. So that is kind of a route. Okay, and in here, when in the API we are trying to define that route. We are trying to define the path through which we can fetch that data. Okay. Name is equals to main, app.run, debug is equals to true. We're setting debug is equals to true because there are some debug logs that are by default assigned within the app development that we want to print. If we assign debug is equals to false, then we will not be able to get those particular errors, and we will have like a very standard error in place. Okay, we won't be able to get the developer log so that we can, go deep into the code. So yeah, app.run runs the application. Next is writing a simple API. This is a get API. As we see JSONify, I can explain on that. REST, I think we have seen. We had slash, in the last slide. Here we have slash API slash data. So what does that mean? We have added on, like we have URL, slash user slash me. So we have kind of added a URL to it, wherein, we can add multiple URLs like that, because everything cannot be on slash. So we have to add some value, one value, two value, and a couple of other values. So it's like that. We have added slash API slash data, and we have methods is equals to get. So we have a get method here that we're trying to say. What do we mean by get method? Get method means, so when we hit an API, okay, and we get some value from it, okay, we are not sending anything in particular, but we're just hitting the API and getting some value. Okay, it's simple as that. Get is basically a type of method that, the type of request that can be made. It has certain protocols how to implement, but it is as simple as that. We are hitting an API and getting some data out of it. We have named our function as get data. So again, the naming of the function has to be in a way wherein, we put the name so that once we read the code, or anybody reads the code, they understand what is happening in that function. So we name the function accordingly. Okay, here we say get data, which now we understand what it does. Return JSONify. In there, we are just simply returning a string, but here, we are kind of adding a function to another string. So why we are doing that? So JSONify is basically a function which says that JSONify is an internal function of Flask, and we are kind of calling that internal function of Flask and saying that, hey, we have this dictionary. If you remember, we talked about dictionaries are used for API, response exchange. So in here, we are using a dictionary which has a key of message and it has a value of hello API. So we are returning that dictionary under JSONify function, and we are asking that, hey, do you take this dictionary and return me a JSON value so that I can return in the response of this particular request. So if I take the value of this request, I will get a JSON version of this particular dictionary. I will not get a dictionary at my end. Why JSON is being used? Because JSON is the standard format for API response. Okay. In REST framework, we kind of use JSON. We can use multiple other formats for sure, but JSON is kind of a standard because it allows easy exchange of data and in a more structured format where we have a particular key and a value assigned to it. So there's no confusion about what is the value about. And we can have objects under objects, so we know what is the parent object, what is the child object. So there's a clear relationship of objects available within a JSON as well. So that's why we use JSON. Next, we can use handling request. So from Flask import request, what we have is this request is basically by default, request is kind of, I would say, a parameter from wherein we get all the details that are passed to a request. For example, a request has some headers, some location value, some authentication. And in here, let's say we do request.json. So from request.json, we are taking some data. Okay. That was a get request. This is a post request. So what we do in a post request, what is the interchange of a post request? It is that we send some data to an API, and then we ask that API to store that data at the backend, okay, and return us a response that says that, okay, this data has been saved or this particular object has been created. Okay. Yeah, so that's what it does. A real life example to this would be, let's say we create a new account at any website. We go and we create a new account. So what we do, we fill out a form and click on sign up. Okay, so what the sign up does, whatever the fields that were filled in the form, it takes all of that data, hit a post API to the backend. The backend goes and validates a request that, username, password, and age. If there's a age limit check, let's say, so it will check for age limit as well. Okay. So it will does all of that, and then what it will do, it will hit the database where it will store that data in the database. Okay. Once that data is stored, then the function that is there in the backend, it will return us a response. And what is that response? In here, in the second line, we see return JSONify data, comma 201. So in here, we are returning the data in the JSON format. So let's say we get some data, we convert that to JSON, and then we return it, and we are also giving a status 201. 201 is the standard for created. When basically it's a status code, HTTP status code 201, which stands for created. Created means an object has been created in the backend. So in this case, database is not integrated, so it is not saving it in the database. We are just taking that data and returning it. Okay, so do not get confused by it. In case of error handling, we can add a error handler like that. Let's say if we occur, in any case, let's say the app goes through an error 404. So we can implement that error and this will be returned then. Okay. So this is how it is. Database. So we have dealt a couple of things in terms of Flask API, in terms of Python. um, after writing the post get API, post API, this is the get API, the post API, and then error handling. What is left is database integration. So under database integration, you can use SQL Alchemy or SQLite or any other database to get started with. It's very easy to integrate. Once you have set up that, you just need to add the name of the server, username, password, and then can get started with. That can be tried on. Then testing your API. So there are a couple of pointers for testing your API. One is through automation testing. Like we know Pythons are already being used for automation. So there is an inbuilt task for Flask, which can be used to write unit test within the application itself. And then for manual testing, Postman or curl can be used. So curl is basically like a command line code wherein that can be used to hit the APIs and get that data, right? What are the best practices of writing an API? Um, so what basically is an API? I think we did not talk about that. So what is an API? So like we wrote get, we had a function which does get. Okay, so this is an API, get API. Now this is a post API because it does a post functionality, right? So that was a get API. We had a post API, and then I guess for API development, now what are the best practices? Okay, so once we know what an API is, okay, we, in order to understand it more or to do development for a larger project, we need environment variables for configuration. Environment variables, as in, let's say if we have a, let's say we have AWS in place, okay, and then we have client key and security key, and we want to integrate AWS in our project. So how do we integrate that? So in that case, because those credentials are very important, we will put that under environment variables, and we will use that for configuration. Okay, we'll not put that under any parts of our code because that is highly risky. Okay, so that's why environment variables are useful. Then we can organize code and blueprints for larger organizations. So basically, when we write large applications, so we can do, write folder structures, or we can do a lower system design, wherein what we can do, we can like chalk out what are the basic functionalities of it, and then can implement on the basis of it, right? So we can map out the entities and then can replicate on the basis of it. Then we have implement authentication authorization. So like I said, when we do sign up, okay, for sign up it is very easy process. We have to fill out a form, signed up, okay. But for sign in we have to authenticate a user. Authenticate means that the username and the password that you have entered, that needs to be authenticated by the backend. Now what backend will do, it will take in the username and password that you have entered into the sign in form. It will go to its own database, it will fetch those values, map it is correct. If it is correct, then only it will return with a response and will move you to the next dashboard. Otherwise, you will be blocked with all the errors that you see on the website, or while you try to log in. Let's say user not found, email not found, password incorrect, and so many other things. Okay. Now, what is JWT? So JWT is JSON Web Token, wherein what we do, we pass a token along with the request. So what does that token do? In that particular JWT, we have data encrypted within it. And what could be that data? That data could be your name. That data could be the name of your organization. It could be other fields as well of your identity. Let's say we can add a fingerprint as well that is being validated at the backend. So that is the function of adding JWT. It adds a layer of security. Next, what we can do is document the API using Swagger. So Swagger is a great tool that integrates with a lot of languages like Java as well, to document your API. What exactly does document your API means? Basically, all the functions that is has all the URLs that they're there. They all get hosted at one particular URL, wherein you can see a list of all the APIs, what parameters are being passed, what response you're gonna get, and maybe you can try that out there as well with some test data. So that's what documentation means. So there are a couple of resources that you can use to go through Flask and Python docs. Over the Google, I think you can search for what are the docs. You can find some tutorials. But the idea is to basically understand what each function does and implement in that way. Then there are tutorials available on Coursera or Udemy. See, everything is available there, but okay. So everything is available online, but what makes more sense is that how much you understand it and are you able to grab that information and put it to the use that you want, right? So I guess that's where the tutorials come into picture, when somebody can, pitch in and can explain that particular concept. So that's where you can refer to tutorials or documentations. Yeah, I guess that's it. But instead of a thank you, I would rather ask you, do you have any questions? If you have, we can take that up over chat.
If you have any question, you can put it in the chat box. Or if you want to ask those questions, please raise your hand. I can give you mic access. Any question, guys?
Okay, no as such. Great. Good for me. We have what projects or functionalities we can make using Flask. We can make a lot of functionalities. I think one of the easiest that I find online, while searching for it, was a task builder, wherein, kind of a task manager, wherein we can build a dashboard to add task or remove task and then mark them as processed. So that can be built. Otherwise, it depends on your imagination and creativity, whatever you can do. Um, in like any web development, or wherein you can use an API, any website that you build in HTML, or in any other front end framework, so that can have a backend using Flask. So you can use Flask for a backend. Okay. Oh, Priyam, that's great. That's great. Then you must be knowing about Flask if you've made a project. Even though the use case is same, but what differences can I expect in terms of usability from a Express API and Flask API? Okay. So Express API is kind of belongs to a different stack, let's say Mern stack. And why Mern stack exists, there's a reason, because all the JS frameworks, as a JS developer, right? If you do not know Python, or if you do not know Java or any other backend, and you just know JS, so you can just get started with frontend and build everything, even the backend in using JS itself.
right? So then you do not have to deal with two languages at once. If you're working on the same, if you're working on front end and back end both. So that one advantage Express has. In terms of Flask, in terms of usability, I would say Flask is very quick and easy. It's not very good for, highly secure and highly reliable kind of projects. If you want to build a huge project, which has a great backend, so Flask is definitely not for that. You should go for Django, or maybe you should go for Java. And Flask is quick and easy to go if you're building for a smaller project, short project, or even for a bigger application, larger application. If you're building something, which wants to take lesser amount of time, or you want to just run a script, or you want to just quickly code something, which requires minimal structure, and you do not want to invest your time in maintaining it, then Flask can be used for sure. Okay, cool. All right. I guess I've explained a lot, but I guess this was a session of explanation. So, okay. If you have any other questions, you can ask anything about backend development or API development out of Python or out of Flask as well. Okay, cool.
So if you are building any project on backend, if you have any doubt, you can also ask Shruti for that. He has very good experience in backend. So I see a lot of people have doubt in backend, like they are very good in front end, but lacks backend. So if you have any doubt, you are building any project, so you can discuss it with Shruti, or you can put in the chat box.
Okay. Yeah, I guess everyone is saying no, all good, all clear. So, yeah, that's fine. In case if you have any doubt, you can reach me out later. Um, yeah, yeah. Thank you, everyone. It was a great session interacting with you as well. I know there was less of interaction, but I think you've been a great audience. You had some really good questions. How can we enjoy working with backend as it's really boring to do? It is kind of boring, yes. Um, and you have to stare at the terminal a lot of times and go through code and again, build complex logic and staying in your head. There's not much to interact with. It's not colorful. It's definitely boring. Um, but when you have when the use case is interesting, you find interest in that structure then. So that's where it lies, the interest lies. And also when, some complex issue comes into the picture, it is either of a database, it is either of AWS or anything, a difficult problem that you're trying to solve. Then you certainly kind of, it captures your attention and you're looking for, reading more documentation or doing something like that. So, yeah, right. Rhythm Faith has said, right. It's interesting as soon as error occurs, because then you're trying to solve onto a problem and all, it takes all of your attention. And then, you would be going through GitHub solutions, Stack Overflow, finding solution documentation. So I guess that's where the interesting part stays for coding, wherein error occurs, you code some solution that resolves the error, and then from 404 or 500 website, your website runs again back to workable condition, and you see everything is working fine. I guess that's the exciting part of it. The brain is screaming and errors are just mess. Okay, yeah. Schemas and APIs are interesting part in backend to learn them. That's great, yeah. Schema is kind of interesting in terms of the entity relationships that we're trying to build. Uh, so that's where it's interesting. APIs are moreover, I would say, interesting wherein we have to write the logic. For example, we have a string matching algorithm and we get to implement that in a function, and then put that in API and do that. So that kind of makes interesting, than just solving a lead code problem to actually you adding it to a function and using that in an API. So yeah, that can become exciting part. So okay. Yeah, just JS things happen. Not a JS person. How do we model entities in a project to be modular and clear code? Uh, okay. That's wherein the schema design part comes into the picture, wherein what relationships are there among the entities. Uh, I guess when we start with project, we do not need to take care of whether it's modular, whether it's clear code. First should be functionality that's working good and fine. Um, then secondly, it should be modular and clear code. Modular, I would say that comes on its own. As soon as you're aware of the use case, it will become modular on its own. Let's say we have Mintra, okay? We have Mintra, we have a shopping website wherein we have different fashion labels, and different fashion labels have their different attires, like type of clothes that they sell. Okay, let's say one sell menswear, one sell women's wear, one also sells footwear. Then there are different categories of things that they do. So when the use case is structured like it, where you have clear categories of things, then the schema that you build, which is the model, the entities that you'll build, how it will be that you will what you will do, you'll have one entity which says that this is a fashion brand, okay, the fashion house, or maybe like that one entity. And then you'd have another entity as uh, you know selling type or a product type, okay. And under that product type, you can have type of products as footwear or bags or clothes, or home furnishings, okay, garden furnishings, electronics, gadgets, accessories. So I think it's the use case, the structure of the use case that imparts modularity uh, to the entities that are there, and that needs to be clear. And in case if it is not clear in the use case, then you need to interrupt and bring that clarity so that it is clear. Uh, and yeah, writing clean code, I guess there are certain practices of writing clear code. What is the what should be the naming convention of function, what should be naming convention of variables, how should you write comments. So there's book clean code on it. You need not to read that whole book completely. If you're interested, you can, but I think as you work along, you'll gain experience and get to know about it. Otherwise, going through a tutorial, or as slowly as you build, you can go through a couple of things. What is the best practice? And I would tell you, most of the best practices are just like common sense, that what makes sense. What is approach while keeping microservice architecture in mind? Uh, while building microservice architecture, the clear approach is to build independent units that can be maintained independently without having dependency on each other. Like there is a clear communication between microservices, but they're not dependent on each other for database or for other logical needs. Okay. Meanwhile, we can take data from them and then use that to process. But in terms of writing code and maintaining code, it should not refer to model set apart in a different microservice application. For example, let's say we have a Flipkart or an Amazon. wherein we have one service which is a user service. User service means what it does is user authentication and authorization, and all it does is maintaining users in the backend and authorizing them, okay, and maintaining a kind of list of login attempts, login hours, right? Whereas there's another service which is a payment service, okay, and what it does is it takes the payment request. So once we hit checkout on our order, payment service will get that request and will process that order for us. And then what payment service will do? It will definitely need all the data that is there in the user service, as in, which user has ordered, okay, at what time it has been ordered, and other details. And not only just user service, maybe other service as well. Let's say, cart service, like how many items were there in the cart or which all products were there. Okay, definitely it will need. But payment services, right, it will need all of that data. So it can call different APIs, get all that data, gather that, and then can hit the payments API. Let's say if you have integrated Razorpay, so that it will hit that Razorpay API and will basically do a transaction from the user's account to the company's account. So whatever the level of transaction that happens in terms of Razorpay API, the payment service will take care of that, will do that. Whatever response it gets from Razorpay API, it will get that data, it will store that in its database for further processing. Further processing means that on Amazon, when you go to orders section, you see what all orders you have put up, right? So what payment service will do, once the order is processed, once the payment is done, it will add that entry that this payment for these number of products has been processed, or if you assign a particular ID order, then it will map that ID and then it will save it against that particular ID that this has been processed, right? So that next time whenever user fetches their orders list, they will see that their payment has been processed. So yes, that's it. Why do you choose Flask over Node.js? I did not choose. I think Python and Flask come together as part of development. I think that's somewhere part of the team as well. They wanted to organize something on Flask. I'm mainly a Python Django developer. I work in Django. Node.js, I worked on it once. Um, for one of the services that I built. Node.js is more popular. Yes, it is definitely. What are some use cases in which Flask is better than Node as you're working? Uh, I told you, like, Flask is easy to go for smaller applications, lower burden on the website or backend. Node is definitely better. Node is, like a reliable service where you can build a full-fledged backend with all the complexities of code, with more dependencies on it. I told you, like, JS is mostly like if you're a JS person, if you're a JavaScript person, so for you to build a backend, you do not need to learn any other language like Python, Java. You can build backend in JS itself. So that's why these frameworks are there in place. Node.js is there. So that's why Node.js is used. And also along with microservice architecture, how do you approach containerization and when and how many containers to make? Okay, that is a very good question, and that is kind of very advanced question. If you have worked on it, maybe you can understand that. So the containerization, how it works is that it depends on the need. What is the need of it? Let's say if you want to make our application platform independent, so then we containerize that application. What do we mean that? Uh, that when we basically containerize our application using Docker, what we do, we write one script wherein we mention what all is needed to run this application. If Python is needed, if Postgres is needed, we mention that under the this Docker script. Okay. And under that Docker script, we write all of that and we run that file. What that file does is it creates a container for us with all of those dependencies that we've written in the script. Okay. Uh, so now we have an environment setup. Okay. By running a script. And that environment can then be used to run our application on it. Okay. Why is it useful? Because right now, when we do application development, we either use a virtual environment on our own laptop. Okay. We create a folder, we run a virtual env, we create a virtual environment. Or what we do when we do pip install. When we do pip install, it goes into the local environment, whatever it is, and it will add all of those modules under that particular laptop system of yours. Now, having one application is fine. One application, you have all those modules, let's say, that is fine. But let's say if we want to run three applications, okay, and one application you use Python version, let's say it's a very old legacy application, we have used Python 2.7. Okay. And in the second application, we're using Python 3. Okay. And then in the next application, we are using Python 3.1 or 3.2. Okay. So now, how are you going to maintain these three applications in one laptop of yours, or let's say in one environment? That is very difficult because those dependencies can anyways collide with each other. If you're trying to run one application and trying to fetch one thing, it can, it can go into different virtual environments. So we want to segregate environments for each application, right? So we want to segregate environments. What we do, we put it in a container. We put the application and so we put the application and we put the virtual environment that it does and all the folder structure that it wants to create. We put that under one container. Okay, that container is that box. Okay, and then what we do, wherever we go, we take that box and deploy it there. Okay, so even like when we have a Docker project, what it does is that when you install Docker and when you run Docker script, what it does, it creates a Docker environment, it install all of those dependencies and run server on top of it, right? That's how containerization helps. Okay, and why containers help? I mean, it's not just for microservice architecture, it's for any architecture. Microservice architecture means just different set of applications that we have. And how many containers to make this is totally on your need. Like if there's one user, you need one container. If there's no user, you do not need any container. If there are thousands of users, so then maybe, depending on the servers you are making, depending on the, the load that you're getting on database, you can decide on the basis of that. There's no fixed answer for the number of containers to run. Okay. So I guess this is fine, right?
Yeah. So, do you have any more questions, guys? I think they are coming up with more questions.
Yeah, that's fine. I think I've taken all of the questions. I don't see any more questions now.
I think, okay. I think that was a great session. Thank you, Shruti, for joining. We can have maybe next call. We can have a workshop or hands-on call. Thank you for joining. Thank you, others, for patiently listening. And next session we will be having on 19th of October, which will be of JavaScript. Okay, I think majority of you wanna have a session on JavaScript. So next we will have a session on JavaScript. from Vivek. Vivek is a engineer at Google. So do join us at 19th of October, and I will be sharing some resources on Python and Flask API post this call over email. We are all also preparing your assignments, so please make sure that you read our email and whitelist our email. Good. Do reach out to me if you have any doubt. Okay, happy to help you. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Shruti, and it was really a great session. It had been a great session, and I think they have really learned a lot of things on backend, discussed about projects, Dockers, and more. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining in. It was great. I was really happy to see so many questions. Thank you for interaction. Uh, I guess Sanskar, I'll just answer this very quickly. You say you can use virtual env. Sanskar, if you're using Python, you can use virtual env to segregate different virtual environments, and then you can activate that virtual environment and use that along with the application. That's kind of local kind of a workaround in case of not using Docker. Um, Thank you, everyone. It was such an informative session. Thank you so much, Wiki Tech. Thank you so much, Ankit, for organizing it and following up. I guess we keep doing more sessions. I'm happy to part of it again. See you soon again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.